the back end of the rotation, speaking of depth, because as soon as Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas got hurt this spring, players we've talked about a lot on the Mets pod, because that's kind of one of it's a niche for us. We love talking about the bottom of the roster. I think it's something that you and I enjoy from a team building perspective. Griffin Canning has been maybe the guy for the Mets pod, kind of in the cult hero mold of Ryan Stanek, where, and listen, we have plenty of misses in this. You're going to miss a lot. But Griffin Canning, Joe, it's not just that the raw production that we've seen recently in the spring, but I think the stuff is starting to look pretty good as well. This is a classic Mets low-end signing of, let's throw him in the pitching lab, see if we can have him throw more of what is good for him, throw less of what hasn't worked, kind of tinker with a few things, and can we get a cheap number 7 starter? And folks, if you're listening and thinking, who the hell cares about the number 7 starter? The number 7 starter on every team in baseball starts games in the first half of the season in this era of pitching. So, Joe, I don't want to get too over our skis here, and obviously we're going to talk about some of the other pitchers in the middle to the back end of this rotation, but maybe Canning can be serviceable over these first 2 months of the season for this team.
There's no reason why. And he basically was, if you look at 2023, like there's a lot of harping on 2024 because he was genuinely the worst starting pitcher in baseball pretty much. But 2023, he was essentially a league average type of pitcher. And I don't see a reason why he can't get back to that here in 2025. What the Mets are doing, they scrapped his curveball. It was a pitch that he liked to throw when he was with the Angels, and it was not a particularly good offering. He's working on a cutter, which he actually threw it twice yesterday in his outing. I'm just looking at StatCast. So it's something he's kind of trying to work on. But the fastball, which is a pitch that he also struggled with the Angels, was a good offering yesterday. Got up to 18 inches of induced vertical break. So the Mets probably worked on a little shape there with him. The slider got up to 2,900 RPMs on it. So the breaking ball looks a little crisper. This is just an example of taking a guy that has something and just making minor tweaks, and that something becomes useful. And as you said, we're not going to get over our skis. We're not telling you Griffin Canning is this year's Luis Severino or this year's Sean Manaea, but there is nothing that I see in his pitch profile and also his history as a pitcher that there's no reason he can't be a league average type of starter, which if you get that is, a number 4 type of guy. I think that's something that the Mets sorely need, especially with Sean Manaea out for some percentage of April. They say he'll be back by the end of April. Frankie Montas out until, I think, realistically June. So they need someone like Griffin Canning to step up. And while it's just spring training, and I know that, it's good signs that we're seeing.
Right. And I think something important to remember with a guy like this, if you're trying to look for, you're trying to go inside the minds of the Mets front office and say, why is he one of the flyers? Because, let's be real. As soon as Montas got hurt, and this only got amplified when Manaea got hurt, the outcry was why would you not bring in, obviously Quintana or another veteran arm that's out there for cheap? And the thought is, when you look at Canning, because you highlighted it, Joe, that he was completely fine in 2023, made 22 starts, 4.32 ERA, and keep in mind how bad the Angels organization is as a whole. So kind of, grade this on a curve a little bit. But the things that stand out to me, Joe, are he was striking out about 10 batters over 9 in 2023. That inexplicably drops to 6.8 in 2024. This guy's 28, 29 years old. That's not like a 34-year-old that the stuff was just gone. And then you look at the walks over 9, jumped up from 2.6 over 9 in 2023 to 3.5, which is just unusable at that point. So there's obviously reasons for optimism that Canning can get back to pitching like a number 5 starter rather than a guy that shouldn't be making starts for a major league team. And I think you highlighted, some of the not simple tweaks, because there's also things behind the curtain that we're not seeing as well that the Mets will hold close to the vest. But and this is larger than a Griffin Canning conversation. I think this is just the conversation with the Mets, whoever the number 5 through 9 starters on the team are always going to be in the Stearns era.
You're not going to hit on all of these kind of projects, right? But the more shots you take, I think they're going to have a higher win percentage than not. And when you look at someone like Griffin Canning, you mentioned the Angels, they are regarded as one of the worst pitching development staffs across the sport, and the Mets are emerging as one of the best. So anytime you could take somebody that has shown something in a bad pitching system and put them in a good one, it could breed results.